Hi, Teresa.
Hi, Rachel.
Yeah. Welcome, everybody. I'm just going to type in a little comment to pin at the bottom. I hope everybody is settling into their weekend with a little bit of calm in the strange times we're living in. Greetings to all of our new and returning faces. This is our little moment to kind of slow down and look collectively and calmly together at the end of our week. And so I'm Rachel Ropeik. I'm the learning director at the Aspen Art Museum. And my guest and co-host this week is Teresa Booth Brown, who is an artist in her own right, as well as one of my educator colleagues at the museum. And we are going to talk about, yeah, I agree, Harriet. We could use the slowing down right now. And we're going to talk about Teresa's practice a little bit and have some conversation, and everybody can certainly ask questions and make comments. But before we do that, we're actually going to do a little bit of an experience that Teresa is going to guide us through today. So I'm going to actually, in a moment when we start this, I'm going to turn off the comments just so they don't keep distracting us. And I'm going to put up on my half of the screen one of Teresa's artworks. And Teresa is going to kind of lead us on a guided meditative look around that artwork. So in order to sort of get into that mode, I would encourage you, if you can, to, silence your notifications on whatever devices are around you. Find a place that you can kind of sit or stand or lie down comfortably and look at your phone for a little while. And here, let me turn off our comments for now. Oops. And I'll bring the commenting back when we get into conversation, but we didn't want it to be distracting anybody's screen real estate. So Teresa, do you want to say anything else or other invitations to people before we get started?
I think we're ready to go.
Okay. All right. So I'm going to put one of Teresa's works up where I can. And of course, even though we tried this earlier, it's now not wanting to behave for me because best laid plans are never quite what we want. But what I'm going to do instead is, you guys will bear with me for a second, is I am going to put this up on my screen so that we have it already. I'm going to view this with full screen. Okay, so here's what we're going to do. Okay, so I am actually going to turn this around and show people this artwork, and I will get it so that the glare does not interfere. And I'm going to go quiet. All right, so.
Great. Okay, good. All right, so everybody, what we're looking at, the image that Rachel is sharing with us, is a collage that I made, and collage brings together a lot of different parts from a lot of different places, so our meditation is a little bit going to be like that. What I'm going to do is I'm going to give you a suggestion about something to look for. It's a little bit of a treasure hunt, and I'd like you to find that in the image that you feel is related to my prompt. For instance, I will ask you, say, to find a dark color in the image, and then we'll take one in breath, nice and relaxed, and then one out breath. for each item that we find while we focus on that element of the piece. Okay, so next I might ask you to focus on a light color, and we'll do the same. And we're going to travel around the whole image this way, looking and breathing. And just be ready for other thoughts or distractions to come in. Just try to let those go and bring your focus back to the image. The meditation should last a little bit less than 10 minutes, and then Rachel and I will resume our conversation. Are you ready to go, Rachel?
I am ready to go.
So let's just take one in breath to practice and one out breath. And I'll try not to go too fast for you. So again, we're going to look for, the first thing we're going to look for is a dark color. So we'll do an in breath and an out breath on any dark color that you want to choose in there. It's all up to you. And then I'd like you to do the same thing with any light color. It could even be white. A deep breath in and a deep breath out. And then we're going to find a warm color. And warm colors are colors like red, yellow, and orange. Warm colors evoke warmth because they remind us of things like fire. So find a warm color, have a breath in and a breath out. And now we'll do the same thing, but we're going to try to find something that's cool. Cool colors, in this case, are going to be probably purple and violet. They also include blue and green. Cool colors evoke a cool feeling because they remind us of things like water or grass. So find something that feels cool in there to you, and take a nice deep breath in and a deep breath out. Now we're going to get a little more complicated. I want you to pick something within the image that you think is beautiful. And it can be a color, it can be a shape or a line or any part of it. And while you focus on that, we'll do a breath in and a breath out. And the next one, we're going to actually try to find something that you think is ugly. And even though it's my piece and I think it's beautiful, that's okay. There might be something in there you don't like. So find something you think is ugly, or even a tiny bit ugly. In and out breath for that little item. And for the next one, I would like you to look for something, find a color or a shape or a line that makes you feel relaxed. It's going to be different for everybody, so find something to focus on that just gives you the feeling of relaxation. It can even be a whole section of the piece, up to you. And take a nice breath in and a breath out. And then we're going to find the opposite of that. We're going to find a color or a shape of something that makes you feel anxious. So see what you can do to find something in there that feels anxious. And do a breath in.
Sorry.
Whoops. That was anxiety showing up, maybe. A breath in
Right.
and a breath out. And our next prompt is, I'd like you to find something in there that you think expresses joy or reminds you of joy. And we'll focus on that for a breath in and out. And then, because we are welcoming all parts of ourself, we're going to look for something in the piece that you think expresses sadness. So find your sadness place. And then a breath in and a breath out. We're going to get a little bit more abstract now. I want you to try to find something that you feel is quiet. It might be a quiet corner of the piece. It might be something even with nothing in it, something quiet. A breath in and a breath out. And now we'll look for the opposite of that one. So find something you think is loud. Can be a loud color, a shape, a loud line. And a breath in and a breath out. And then we're going to look for something that represents the future. And if you've focused on the same shapes and you want to try something different, try maybe a combination of shapes or a few colors that are next to each other. Something that represents the future for a breath in and a breath out. Everybody's doing great. And now we're going to focus on something that represents the past. So find something that represents the past in there for you. Take a breath in, the breath of the past, and we're going to let it go. The breath out, there goes the past. And the next one I'd like you to find is something that feels heavy. So find something heavy for yourself in there. Breathing in and then breathing out. And just because we're doing opposites, now we'll do light. So pick something that feels light. So in and out breath for the light. We're getting to the end here. I'd like you to find something in there that makes you feel optimistic or hopeful. And we'll look at that and take an in breath and an out breath. And now for the last part, what I'd like you to do is we're just going to do, let's do 6 in and out breath cycles, and we're going to just move around the image, just going from section to section. It can be things that you visited before, and you're going to revisit, or it can be a new path through the image. And this is a meditation that you can do with any object or actually anything you're looking at. You could even be looking out the window, or you could be lying down with your eyes closed and just think of something, a way to do this. So let's travel through the image for a few breaths in and out. Let's do 6. And we're just going to move from one shape, line, or color to the next, taking one breath for each place you want to stop, and embrace that part of the image, remembering all of the associations that we had when we were doing the exercise. Acknowledge them. Move on to the next part of the image. Part of it is to brace all of it, all of yourself, the beautiful, the ugly, joy, anxiety, the past, the future, all of it. It's all welcome. And just remember that there's no other person in the whole world like you, and your choices, the path that you take through this particular artwork, are unique to you. So that makes it very personal. We'll take one deep breath in, one last breath, and one deep breath out. And then we will return to the world a little bit here. And we will return to Rachel.
Sure. We'll come back on.
Did you try the meditation, or were you too busy holding the technology?
No, I was trying to follow along with
Okay.
you and kind of watch while we went.
Great.
I'm going to turn the comments back on too, so we can start kind of sharing, and I will start by, I guess, maybe I will share some of my own kind of observations about that process for me. And if anybody else wants to start sharing some of their thoughts, I will read the comments. I'll keep paying attention to the comment feed, so you don't have to worry about it, Teresa. But I will say one thing that I found really interesting for me as I was going was that I kept finding myself returning to some of the same pieces of the work with different prompts. So like something that felt light and cool, right? You know, it was like every time you kind of, I tried not to think about it too much and to just sort of like let my eyes go to wherever they wanted to go. But then it was kind of interesting to do that, noticing at the end that like I ended up looking quite a lot at, you know, some of the dark violet purples for several of your prompts.
Interesting.
Right? And like what that says about my brain, I don't know, but
Well, and probably every time you did it, you would come up with a different solution. But
yeah.
it's a fun way. I mean, a lot of times I'll go into a museum or a gallery and I'll do this with, I'll pick one piece to try this with. And even if it's a familiar work of art that I've already done it with, it is something, it's always a different, you know, it's a different pathway through that work of art because, you know, we're different people every day.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, I'm curious from anybody, if anybody who is watching along was doing it as well. Did you notice anything about kind of where your looking went, or did you have that same situation that I did, or like what were your own observations about your looking? Feel free to add them in the comments. I will grab them as they come. But I'm also kind of curious for you, Teresa, like because you know, this is one piece that we've done this with, but this is a whole kind of theme and series throughout your artwork is making these kind of collages as a focal point for meditation.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sort of curious how you developed that part of your practice to begin with. Simone keeps being drawn to the bright pink, apparently. That seems very hopeful. I feel like the bright pink was where I went with the hopeful.
Oh, good. That's really good. Well, a lot of this has been, I think, just a lifelong interest that I've had. And then for the past year, I've been working. I received an amazing award to be the Marian Fellow for, it's a fellowship through SUNY Fredonia. And what they do is they fund you for 18 months in a kind of supportive, creative journey to focus on one idea and visit a lot of different locations. I went to the UCross Foundation for a residency and worked on this. And I was supposed to go to the University of Alberta in Canada this summer, maybe next summer. I went to Chautauqua Institution, and I'll end up at SUNY Fredonia hopefully in the fall. But it's been an unusual year for me where I had just sort of one theme to work on this project. My project is called the Neo-Quietism Project. And what that is it's historically Quietism it's a religious philosophy with roots in Buddhism, but a lot of other traditions have embraced it, like the Quakers really embraced it, but it's about the experience of turning inward using stillness and contemplation to focus your mind. And because that's such a big part of my artistic practice anyway, I mean, that's what I'm doing when I'm working in the studio. I'm really trying to focus my mind. I've been really enjoying the thought of, I guess, preparing ways of sharing that with other people. And that's what these exercises have been. So I've gotten to travel a little bit and share this with a lot of people and fine tune my exercise. I also use it for making art. So I have a collage exercise where people actually make those choices, except they're picking up a piece of paper that feels heavy or light or hopeful or anxious to them, and then making a collage out of all those parts.
That would be an interesting way too. And I think that was my mom earlier in the comments saying that like she had a similar experience of viewing it to the way I did. But I wonder if that comes about when you're asking people to make art using these prompts, like if people keep being drawn to kind of some similar thinking patterns or seeing patterns
Yeah, I think
the
so.
way that we might as a viewer.
Yeah, I think that really happens because when you end up with the collage, it's sort of like, okay, well, what do all these pieces add up to? And I mean, not surprisingly, they actually add up to some, it's a little formula about you. I mean, certainly it's your choices, but, what does that mean? I mean, if it's abstract art, I think it's kind of an interesting question to look at those choices. And that's been a fun process to see.
So do you also find like when you're making them, even if you're not leading a workshop for other people to make them, when you're making them, are you consciously thinking about these kinds of specific prompts to create the collages yourself, or do you feel like that doesn't come in there?
That's such a good question. Um, Not really. I think when I make the collages, it's almost like I have um, I have like, they're a little bit like diagrams, I guess I would say, this current body of work, and it really functions well for this exercise. And I have in my mind when I'm making them, like a formulation or like a very rough image of what I want that to look like. And so I'm just putting the pieces together until I find that. Maybe I'm reverse engineering the same thing that when you look at it. Yeah, good
Well,
question.
because there is, it's like, and I feel like to me, and I think this says just as much about my own aesthetic sense as anything else, but I think to me, the sense of that diagram like feeling to them is part of what makes it feel kind of soothing to spend that much time kind of looking at specific places as you were prompting us. Um, like it, I don't know that I would have felt as like it wouldn't have been as easy for me to settle into that kind of prompted looking if it had been a little more chaotic or free form or kind of like fully just washes of color or abstraction. I mean, you could obviously do this, as you said, with anything you want to look at, but I
Right.
do feel like there was something about that sort of scientific, almost, diagram organized layout that let me kind of settle in. Like it felt very stable.
Yeah. Well, I like that. That makes sense because it's really, my work is abstract, but I'm trying to do something very specific with a very specific language. And the language, well, the language is abstraction. The vocabulary is my own. So I guess the format of the diagram really makes sense to me. That it's like a diagram is like a visual way of organizing information. And I don't think that my artwork is really that much different, especially in this case, because I'm trying to be very specific about what I'm saying. So, yeah, I like that. You said that. Thank you.
I mean, I don't know. I'm curious to know if anybody else watching wants to chime in the comments. Like, if that didn't feel the same to you, by all means, please share your own observations and thoughts.
Well, I wonder too if because it's very geometric, I think that adds to it because it's like, you have a line, it's like chutes and ladders. You go down the line, you go around the circle, behind the shape. It kind of lends itself to that movement, that visual movement.
Yeah, I agree. And I feel like that helped too when you were asking us to look for different parts. I did find myself in some places, kind of following one line. If I was looking at one corner, I would follow a line to another section of it. And
Nice.
that would be where I ended up looking next.
Yeah, it's like a jungle gym for your eyes
Yeah, yeah.
and your brain.
So when you're composing these collages, then are you trying intentionally to kind of create those little pathways that people might follow, or do you try to let your own eye sort of have its say?
Well, I would say both. I mean,
Okay.
it's like currently what I'm really interested in is that kind of movement around and, creating a new kind of space. I don't even know if that's possible, but to create a space within that abstraction, within that little diagram, is a little bit of a trick. And I spend a lot of time looking at it and traveling around and trying to create, new spaces within that. Oh, maybe I want to go back here, or maybe I want my eye to go up here, so I'll add something. So I'm definitely trying to push that as much as possible. It makes it fun.
Are you ever able to kind of just like settle into one of them and do one of these kind of guided exercises yourself, or do you feel like you kind of know too much having created it that
Yeah, probably. But
you
every new collage I make is like a new, it's a new jungle gym. It's a new exciting thing. I mean, I'm really trying to surprise myself and create something I've never seen before. So, I have that
yeah.
excitement to enjoy.
And I was also kind of curious about like you picked some specific things to prompt us with, right? So, and you had a pathway, you started with some more straight up visual observation, and then it became more about our interpretation of what felt light or what felt heavy or anxiety provoking or that sort of thing. Um, have you worked with those prompts over time, or like
Yeah,
do you always use the same ones, or do you let that come to you in the moment? How do you kind of decide how
yeah,
you want?
that's a good question. A little bit of both. I mean, it really started with I did some work last fall at the Wyoming Girls School. It's basically an incarceration facility in Wyoming for teenage girls. They live and go to school up there, and I was really lucky. I got to work with them. They're really quite amazing. But I wanted to teach them about abstraction without using that word, and so what I started to do was to use these prompts like, find something light, dark, warm, cool, but then increasingly make the prompts more and more abstract. So, something quiet, that's not something you can just look in and find. You have to interpret that a little bit. So I guess that's where a lot of the prompts came from, thinking abstractly in order to create something abstract. I mean, it was a wildly successful exercise with these girls, but I liked it because it naturally gets people there, right? Without me saying like, we're going to think abstractly now, you know?
Right.
I like to just make it more fluid. And then, it doesn't, and I also don't want to be the expert of this. I want people to have their own experience and feel like, they're bringing their own expertise to it instead of me
Yeah.
telling them what to do.
Yeah, which I feel like when you start throwing words like, abstraction and neo-quietism and, it's like I
Yeah,
will be a nerd for all of those words, right? But you can't
yeah.
always assume that everybody will be.
I, I mean, like my project has a fancy name, but you don't need to know that name to enjoy the exercise or to look at the work or any of that. You should be able to look at any artwork, I think, and have a direct experience with it. So
Yeah.
that's what I'm hoping for.
I'm right there with you. I feel like it's like museum educator, credo that everybody should be able to have an experience with any kind of artwork.
Yeah, yeah.
But I do want to go back. Marilyn was asking, what kinds of books are you reading, and what artists are you thinking about as you're kind of
Mm.
creating this work, or in
I
relation
love
to?
that. So, well, I'll answer that in a short and in a long way, but I have a whole blog about the neo-quietism, and on that blog there is a whole reading list of everything that I've read, because I have been researching a lot of, which other artists have done this kind of work. So, there's obvious ones like Hilma af Klint, but, Kandinsky did a lot of early work about learning how to look and working with abstraction. So I'd say take a look there. There's I think 40 books on my list.
Plug for the blog.
But I have been looking at every artist that I have, thought might give me a little bit of a clue to how they thought about abstraction and what that could bring to my project. So that's a nice question. Thank you.
And then someone else was asking and mentioning that Carl Jung also kind of had this practice of, and you're nodding, I'm sure you are well aware of this, but I get to learn things too.
Yeah.
That the creation of mandalas as a kind of therapy. And so you were talking about creating these collages with people as sometimes what you do. Do
Yes.
you feel like there's a therapeutic um, element to that, or have other people talked about them feeling therapeutic?
Absolutely. I mean, I love it that Jung was brought up because that's something I've read a lot about. He was really interested in the mandala, and really, I think that a lot of these collages end up looking like a mandala. Mandala is a way of focusing your mind for meditation, so it makes perfect sense. And actually, I mean, I hope this isn't an aside. One of my early pieces, I did a piece for the Boulder Museum of Contemporary Art, and then I also did it at Anderson Ranch as well. It was a mandala made out of 400 gingerbread cookies. Because I'm also a pastry chef, so I like to get food in there whenever I can. And each cookie was an individual mandala, but then the pattern that the cookies made was another mandala. And then when people came to the opening, as you do with a traditional mandala, mandala is destroyed at the end. And so we destroyed it by eating the cookies.
That's like the most delicious mandala experience I feel like anybody
Yeah.
could ever hope for.
So that was maybe an indirect way of answering that question. But Young, I think, is was very interested in all these things,
I
and he
I
made
mean
art
I
himself.
do
Yeah,
yeah, I mean I think it's like that idea of, therapeutic, like whether you want to think of it as kind of official part of some sort of therapeutic um program, or just kind of therapeutic in maybe the little lowercase t
yeah,
sense. There is something kind of soothing about um, making, whether it's cookies or following a path with prompts, or making one of these collages that I can imagine is sort of, when you're putting intention behind the decisions that you're making, or kind of giving your brain the time to flow through that.
right.
There is something that feels very soothing about it.
Well, it should. I mean, I think art should be. Uh, I think art should have that quality. I think art has the potential to do a lot of things for a lot of people. But I really want to help people find more ways to access work just individually, I mean, I love it. I'm a museum educator, right, too. So I love information and all this kind of thing. But I also want that people can have a direct access, just you and the artwork, and you know what to do. You know how to look.
I totally agree, and I know you and I have talked about this, but I will repeat it for anybody watching, that I think one of the things that I love so much about museum education as a field is, I think for lots of people, coming into museums, they kind of think, oh, I'll go on a tour, they'll give me information, then I'll know about the art, and I will have like ticked some box of, being a better informed human being, or whatever that process is that goes into people's heads. And I think that's totally valuable, right? And I'm not knocking that. But like you just said, it's like that's not the only way of knowing,
Yeah.
right? Or the only way of experiencing artwork. And so I do think there's some real power in like just helping people develop their own looking skills and
Yeah.
their own looking abilities.
Well, right, and also to make it less intimidating, maybe, because I think abstraction can be challenging for people,
Yeah.
and I really, I often say to people, it's like meeting a famous person, say, so maybe you're intimidated by meeting somebody because you don't know, they're fancier than you or whatever. Well, looking at a piece of artwork that you might be intimidated by is no different, but you got to remember that you're bringing a lot to that artwork, not that the
Yeah.
art cares, but that you're bringing your own experience, and that's what you're going to go off of when you look at that artwork. And that's
Yeah.
a wonderful thing.
And I will say, for anybody who was watching along, it would be an interesting thing to test, because we also posted on the Instagram feed, the museum's Instagram feed, we posted an image of this collage that we just used as the focal point for this exercise. But it would be interesting to go back after this, tomorrow or next week or whatever it is, and to think about some of those prompts again and see, you know, if your eyes are drawn to the same places or to different places. Because I do think so much is about, you know, well, what has happened today and what's the weather like and what did you eat and how did you sleep last night? And all of these things kind of impact our experiences of looking. And I wonder if it would, how different it might be to return to the same artwork and
Yeah,
think of some of the same prompts, but with a different set of experiences informing it.
right, right. Or apply them to a different set of artwork. Oh, it's so much fun to see who's joining.
I
Um,
know.
looks like Nikki and Simon are on.
Yeah, I mean, I am sort of curious to know, I guess also, have you been continuing this series throughout this kind of quarantine moment and how, if at all, do you feel like making it has changed for you? Because
Hmm.
I know it's a series you were working on before, so it's not like it's the idea has come to you, but
Yeah.
I don't know. Have you been thinking about that at all?
Yeah, well, it's interesting because I've actually been pretty busy working for the museum, but but I'm trying to get some of my work done. And I was thinking how, you know, I'm doing this thing that's about, I mean, really, it's exploring what the meditative and restorative, I guess, potential
Mhm.
is that's found in the experience of looking at abstract art. So I've been able to a little bit, I guess, embrace that for myself and find a moment of peace and solitude in, I think, a time that's very stressful. It's certainly, I mean, as an artist, I've had a lot of, I had an incredible calendar with all kinds of opportunities. I was supposed to teach in France and go to Canada and, you know, all this kind of stuff. And like every other artist, all that stuff disappeared. So just having my own studio and having my work to look at is a very lucky thing. I mean, I don't have any opportunities maybe, but well, I'm here. I'm very thankful for this opportunity. Um, yeah, so even, you know, I think it's been very, I guess I'm using it as my own medicine and at this time,
Yeah.
you know?
Making your own medicine in a way that does not require strange pharmaceutical
Exactly.
experimenting.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Take
Well, and I think
care.
it's, you know, it's, I forget who said earlier in the comments at the beginning of our session today, but that it's like any opportunity that we can take in these times to sort of slow down or take a breath, or, you know, I feel like so many people are talking about trying to work meditation into their routine in some sense,
Yeah,
even if it was not a regular part of their life before.
yeah.
This is kind of yet another way of doing that.
No, I think it's important. I mean, you know, we're all in the pandemic, but you can't be in the pandemic all the time. It's not something that you can live in 24 hours a day. You have to have time, you know, where you experience beauty and where you experience hope and joy and where you enjoy other people in whatever way you can or communicate. You know, all these are all ways of being human, and we have to intentionally pursue those things right now at this time when we're really pressed. It's even more important than ever.
I feel like I maybe we can wrap up our conversation on that note. That was such a lovely way of of putting it, but I feel like that's, you know, if anybody watching is in the United States, we are now heading into Memorial Day weekend, which is a 3-day weekend, which for many people means, you know, Monday would be a holiday, but that feels so different in this moment when very few people are following any kind of regular routine about time off. So I hope maybe that can be a nice little reminder of seeking out kind of moments of joy and beauty and introspection and connection where we can find it. Um,
Maybe
and
create
whether
your own holiday. Make up your own
that's right.
excite for my
It's Neo-Quietism Day.
Neo-Quietism Day.
So
Thank you.
maybe the last thing that I will say before I thank Teresa and wrap up is for anybody watching who has been tuning in regularly. Next week's guest is actually joining us from France. And so we're going to be doing it slightly earlier in the day so that we can connect with him. So our guest next week is going to be Abraham Cruz Viegas, who had previously had an exhibition at the Aspen Art Museum. and he is currently in France. So we are going to be doing our Slow Look Live next Friday at noon. Thank you, Simone. Noon Mountain Time, which is 8 p.m. in France, which is, 11 a.m. Pacific time in the US, or 1 p.m. Central Time in the US, or 2 p.m. Eastern Time in the US, wherever you may be. And we'll share all of that information, but just because I know there are some people who join in every week, giving you a little heads up, we'll be coming to you earlier next week. But in the meantime, for this week, I want to thank you, Teresa, for sharing your work and for leading us through it, and then also for just kind of talking about the importance of slowing down and focusing and being quiet and all of those things.
Thank you so
So
much.
maybe I will flip my camera around one more time, and we can end on the image of Teresa's work for everybody to take one more look at. And if you do want to go and keep looking at it, it is posted on our Instagram feed, so it will not disappear from your life after this. And then you can go and look at Teresa's blog for all of her book recommendations and other thoughts and artwork. So thank you, Teresa. This was a very lovely little afternoon chat.
Thank you so much.
Experience.
It was my pleasure. Take care, everybody.
Bye, everyone. Have a nice weekend.
Bye-bye.
Bye.